Welcome back to the Pack and Clint Show. I'm Pack, that's Clint, and we're here on Total Coverage Network. We really appreciate you guys being here. Another episode here on a Tuesday. College football season wrapping up. We've got a national championship in 6 days that Clint and I are going to preview. We'll talk a little bit of Texas portal news. We'll talk about some of the recent additions, some of the guys that Texas is still in the hunt for, guys that we think Texas should get, guys that we think Texas will get, and what that means for next year's roster. And then we'll wrap it up there. Next week, we're going to recap some of the national. We're going to recap the national title. We'll recap the portal for Texas, and then we're going to talk about our way too early expectations for next year. We might talk starters. We'll talk a little bit about what we think Texas's schedule and what that prediction will end up looking like. And then we'll, in the next couple of weeks, Clint and I will start doing this thing where every episode we'll explain a concept. So maybe one week Clint will explain inside zone. I'll explain base quarters, and we'll go from there just to get you guys more informed on what you're watching each Saturday and Friday. So we're really excited for you guys to be here. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet. Follow Ghost on Twitter. Follow Total Coverage on YouTube. Follow them on X, and do all the things that you can support us. Follow Clint at NBA Hornboy. I'm Pack at Pack Talks XO. All the support is really appreciated. Clint, how you doing?
Doing good. Just getting back into the new semester. Last time we left off, Texas was about to play Michigan, and we came out with the win in the Cheez-It Bowl, ended with the 10-win season. So it was a good break, and just ready to get back into it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of saying it. We can just get right into it. Starting with Indiana, Miami, obviously the national championship, a de facto home game for Miami. It's going to be in Hard Rock Stadium. For those who don't know, that's where Miami plays their home games. It's not really a home game most of the year for Miami because they don't get many fans there, but you assume that'll change here because it is a national championship. I think it's going to be a really interesting game. There's a lot of strength on strength things, there's a lot of unknowns here for Miami. Obviously, the strength starts in their trench play. They do a really good job of moving the line of scrimmage on both sides where they'll reset the line of scrimmage 4 or 5 yards down the field on offense. They're a downhill football team. They're going to run a lot of duo, a lot of zone cut. A lot of their run game is centered around the fact that they're bigger than you and they're stronger than you, and they just want to lean on you. And then every once in a while, they'll come out with a stretch play or a toss sweep or a jet sweep or a rocket sweep to get you moving side to side. But for the most part, they want to hit you downhill. They want to play out of really condensed splits. Against Ole Miss, you saw a lot of bunches. You saw a lot of 3 receiver sets where they're really tight together, and you saw them be really close to the end of the line of scrimmage, really close to the tackle. That's something that Indiana is probably going to see a lot of. It's not something that's foreign to them. Ohio State does this a lot. A lot of Big Ten teams do this. Oregon does this a decent amount. So in terms of what Indiana is going to see from a formational perspective, it's not going to be completely new. There's going to have some comfort there, but the difference is this is probably the best offensive line that Indiana has played. And if you go back and you watch the Oregon tape, Oregon in the first quarter and even the first half, outside of sacks, did a pretty good job of running the ball. They were able to get about consistently 5 yards a carry, especially when they were in 12 personnel. Miami is an even better offensive line than Oregon, so that to me is something I'm going to watch really extensively for because that could really swing the game. Because if Miami can run the ball and they can get into 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2 and eliminate Haynes' ability to run all the different simulated pressures that he wants and be able to mess with protections the way that he does, that's going to go a long way in terms of making sure that Carson Beck doesn't make a critical mistake and making sure that Miami is able to put points on the board and be efficient. And then on the other side, Indiana really in the playoff has kind of done what Ohio State did last year, where you saw one offense throughout the entire year, and then it felt like a completely different offense in the playoff. And that's kind of how I would feel watching Indiana because, especially in their pass game, because if you watch them in the regular season, they're really heavy in terms of RPOs. They ran a lot of RPO slants, a lot of RPO hitches, a lot of RPO glance routes. And then the postseason, their base down calls have been a lot more true quick game, where you'll see a curl flat combination, you'll see a spin concept where the two runs a hitch and the one runs a dig behind it. They do a lot of different things now in terms of true pass concepts, true NFL quick game things that you'll see in the pros. And it creates a different level of stress. It creates a different stressor to a defense than something like RPOs, especially if you're overhangs. And so that'll be something that's really intriguing to see, especially for a Miami team that does run a lot of five-man pressures. To me, those are going to be some of the more intriguing matchups is how does Indiana in their quick game respond to the five-man pressures of Miami? Can Miami create pressure with five mans, and then can they get Indiana into enough third and longs that Bain and Mesidor can wreak havoc? Because if you can't get into third and long against Indiana, they're going to score more than 20 points, and that's where you're going to really struggle offensively because you're now going to have to be super efficient, and you're going to have to put together two or three really, really good drives, and you're also going to have to make sure you don't turn over the ball. And so that to me is a really, really big factor. I will say, if you look at the games where Indiana did not run the ball well, you're going to look at Iowa, you're going to look at Penn State, and you're going to look at Ohio State. And when you look at those three games, that is 19 points against Iowa, it's 13 points, and it's 27 points. So it isn't exactly like they're lighting it up when they can't run the ball. And so to summarize this, and it's pretty cliche, whoever runs the ball better is probably going to win this game because it's offense that's going to be in more consistent third and shorts and third and mediums, and that's going to be the offense that does a better job of not putting their respective defense in a tough position.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to say this game, to be completely honest. With Indiana, like you touched on it, a lot of the year they did play some pretty bad teams, so their offense was just able to be on fire like most teams would be able to. But they did see a couple good defenses throughout the year to where their offense was stifled a bit. As you mentioned, Iowa, to where they came out with, I think, a single score victory. And then against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, where they ended up sneaking out a 13-10 win. But once they've gone to the playoffs, their offense has really hit its stride and they've been rolling, putting up 38 on Alabama and then putting up, I think it was 55 or 56, somewhere around that number on Oregon. Miami will be a much better defense than they've played in the playoffs, though. Miami has a very good defense. Their front seven, one of the best in the nation. Um, you did see in the Oregon game, as you mentioned earlier, about how Oregon was able to run the ball decently, but with the early turnovers that were created with the Dante Moore pick six on the first play, and then when he was backed up against his own end zone and the ball slipped out of his hands, putting Indiana in a first and goal situation, they kind of had to resort from that running game and start throwing it downfield more to get back into the game quickly. That being said, Miami, though, I'll say this before I get my prediction. Miami, though, they've surprised me this playoff run. I thought that they were possibly going to get eliminated first round by Texas A&M, but they played really good football as of late. Obviously, they beat A&M. They come out with a win and beat Ohio State, which I predicted Ohio State to win that game. And then they go play Ole Miss, who was able to knock off Georgia and sneak out of that game. But they've played a lot of close games. They know how to win these close games. They've done it about three different times in their three playoff games. Um, so it will come down a lot to running the ball because that is what Miami does really well. Mark Fletcher is a great running back. Um, this game's hard for me to pick, but I think with how much I've seen Indiana um, improve this playoff run and how dominant they've looked in both their games, I think I'm going to go with Indiana, even though, like you said, it is going to be in Hard Rock. It's going to be in the Miami Hurricanes home stadium. I'm going to take Indiana to win this game, and I'm going to take it about a 27-17 game. I think that Carson Beck will throw a late interception or two, and that will seal the Canes' fate and bring the Hoosiers their first ever national championship.
Yeah, this is a really tough one because I think just on face value and when you watch the tape, you can really see an avenue for Miami being able to run the ball and Miami being able to stop the run. where you do kind of you watch the tape and you watch these teams and you just look at their body types and you kind of think, well, Ole Miss ran a lot of movement. They ran a lot of stunts on last Thursday, and Miami did a tremendous job handling them. And that's what they're going to see a lot on Monday. They're going to see a lot of stunts. Um, Indiana runs a lot of nose tackle stunts when they're in three down, when they're in mint. When they're in four down, you'll see a lot of nose tackle stunts where they're picking the center and they're wrapping. Uh, so a lot of the stuff that Indiana does from a front standpoint, Miami just saw a week ago, and Miami did a tremendous job of handling those stunts. They did a tremendous job of knowing how to respond to them and knowing and understanding how to gain width, how to block everything up. And so it makes you think that Miami's going to be well prepared to handle all the different games that Indiana runs up front. And for that reason, you do think that Miami is going to be able to run the ball. But I think the way this comes down to is a lot of the times when you have a team that's a good matchup for the other team, but you don't think they're as good or they don't execute on a down to down basis. I think the team that's just all season long has executed at a higher level or the team that's more consistent typically wins these games, even if they're not, even if it's not a great matchup for them. I think pretty much to the Clemson and Alabama games a couple back in the late to early 2010s where the better team didn't always win, or the team that had the better matchup didn't always win. Right in 2016, Alabama wasn't a great matchup for Clemson, and Clemson won because they just executed at a higher level more consistently. And that's kind of how this game feels to me, where I think Miami is a bad matchup for Indiana. But because Indiana is so down to down good, and Miami has really struggled to do that, we saw that against Ole Miss, where they could move the ball at will, and then they would get a really stupid penalty, or they would get a false start, or they would get a hold, or they would run a toss sweep when they're pounding it down Ole Miss, right? So they Miami has a propensity to hurt themselves. Indiana does not do that. And so I'm going to take Indiana. I think it'll be really close. I think it'll be 20-17. But I think it's a really fascinating matchup. I don't think I'd be surprised at all if Miami wins. If Miami plays their best game, I think they're going to win just because they just straight up are more talented than Indiana. The draft's going to show this. So I'll take Indiana, but I'm not going to be surprised at all if Miami wins. And I think you said it really well too. I think Carson Beck. I do think eventually Indiana is going to figure out some stuff in the run game. I do think eventually Carson Beck is going to make a mistake or two just because of how multiple Brian Haynes is in terms of coverage. You'll see. I think especially with what they do from a Tampa 2 perspective, what they do from a three cloud perspective, where they'll play cover three, but they'll have their corner be a curl flat player, what they do from a quarter, half, and a half quarter perspective. All of that ends up looking the exact same to a quarterback, except when you actually see it, the safety's eyes, their technique, the corner's eyes and technique are different. But you're not going to be able to see that as a quarterback when you're sped up. And so I think the coverage multiplicity may give Beck a problem or two, and I do think you can see him turn the ball over. So for that reason, I will take Indiana, and I think what you said is really smart.
Yeah, if you have nothing else to say, I think we can dive into a lot of Texas fans will be waiting for, which is a good amount of talk about the portal acquisitions that we've gotten. First guy we're going to talk about today is the guy that has been the biggest name that Texas has been targeting in this portal cycle thus far. The biggest one that a lot of people were looking for, which is Cam Coleman, who committed to us, I believe, Sunday. He committed to us. Um, Best number one wide receiver in the portal, and I think a top five overall player. What are your initial thoughts about this acquisition?
Yeah, so I would immediately say I think this is the second best player to enter the portal. Jordan Seaton, who's not officially in the portal yet, but he will be, would be number one. This is a really, really important get for Texas. I think for one, it gives Arch Manning a security blanket. It gives him a guy that you can just throw the ball up to. Last year, Clint, you, I, and a lot of people in a Texas group chat, we had a conversation about how Texas does not have a guy that you can just throw the ball up to and you trust to make a catch in a jump ball situation. We thought Parker Livingstone maybe that he did not have the hands for it. We thought Ryan Wingo may be that just because of his size. Again, didn't have the hands for it. Emmett Mosley was kind of this, but he's not the vertical leaper in the way that you'd want someone to be. Well, now Texas has that because Cam Coleman is an exceptional vertical athlete. He's got incredible, he's got incredible up and down quickness. He does a really good job of getting off his feet. You talk about guys playing above the rim in basketball. That's what Cam Coleman is. He's got he's able to stay in the air for a really long time. He does a great job of being on balance in the air. Some guys, when they jump, you'll see them lean or you see them fade, and it causes them to be out of position when they're going up for balls. He does a really good job of staying balanced in his jump, doing a really good job of staying balanced in his weight. He does a really good job of understanding when to jump, when to take a leap, and understanding the timing of that. So all of that is just Arch Manning now has someone in the red zone that you can throw the ball up to, and you probably are going to have a touchdown. We saw in 2023 this was a big thing with Adonai Mitchell. Quinn Ewers had a lot of success throwing jump balls to AD Mitchell. That's something I think you'll see with Arch Manning and Cam Coleman in the red zone. And then outside of that, he's got incredible ability to create yards after catch and yards after contact because he is such a big body. He's 6'3", weighs above 200 pounds. He's not a great route runner, right? When you're 6'4", 6'3", you're just naturally going to have stiffer hips. You're not going to be able to sink into your hips and be able to really create explosiveness out of breaks the way someone who's 5'11" will, just because of the way that they're created. So he's not going to be the greatest route runner, but when you're as strong as he is, when you have the catch radius he has, when you've got the stride length he has, similar to Jeremiah Smith, you don't need to be the most refined route runner when you're a physical freak. You can just create separation by the fact that you're bigger and stronger than someone. So at the break point, you might be able to, instead of pushing off, you put an elbow into someone, and that's a full yard of separation, and now you break. And because you take such long strides, that's another yard. And now you've given yourself a slant window that's wide open for a quarterback. So that's going to be really important for Texas. It's a really big thing for Cam Coleman. It's one of the things that makes him so enticing is he can make a screen go from 5 yards to 20 yards. And that's really, really important for an offense that wants to be explosive. You don't want to consistently have to have 10-play drives in order to score. You want to be able to say, okay, we're going to have a 7-play drive. We're going to have a 3-play drive. We're going to have a 10-play drive. You want to be able to balance it, and Cam Coleman helps in that in a lot of ways. It also means Ryan Wingo can now play as a Z, and you can use him in motion. You can use him in cheat motion. You can run orbit motion. You can use him in ways that we saw more in 2024, where he was moving all across the line of scrimmage and he was put into advantageous positions. And it means the wide receiver room for Texas, especially the first three, is one of the best in all of America. And when you have who's likely to be the number one overall pick in 2027, that's really, really exciting for an offense.
Yeah, definitely the most excited I've been about a commit thus far this portal cycle. You bring a lot of positives when you have Cam Coleman coming in. The first, which you touched on, is his jump ball ability and his ability to high point the ball. He does a great job at that. He has a lot of plays where he's in the end zone, whether it's on the goal line with a fade or it's a deep ball to where he has to jump up for it. He does a great job at bringing it down. He's made a lot of freak athlete plays when catching the ball. Um, what you also bring with him is you bring a guy who has a good amount of speed. He can break arm tackles. He's not a guy that's likely going to go down if you just tap his ankle or something like that. That we've seen with a lot of receivers at Texas. The one thing I would probably say a critique for him, he does have some stiff hips in certain ways. He's still very athletic though. And what it also brings is not just him alone, which him alone is an amazing wide receiver. Um, you don't have to have Ryan Wingo play a wide receiver one anymore, which having Ryan Wingo play a wide receiver two, which some of the reasons why this is better you mentioned, I feel like he's going to flourish a lot more at that position to where he's not having to do certain concepts that he's not comfortable with or play a certain role that is not necessarily meant for him. Ryan Wingo to wide receiver two, I think we'll do a lot better. Even I saw that Ryan Wingo was one of the lead recruiters for Coleman throughout this whole thing and kept in contact with him. So I think Ryan Wingo even acknowledges that him not having to be the primary receiver not only gives the team a better chance to succeed, but himself a better chance to succeed. And one critique that I've seen people point at other teams that didn't get Coleman that are just upset about it, they like to point to his numbers and compare to other receivers. What you have to take into account is the two quarterbacks that Cam Coleman had to deal with were Peyton Thorne and Jackson Arnold. Peyton Thorne, obviously, I don't think he's the worst of the two, but Peyton Thorne wasn't great. And then Jackson Arnold, that dude's just not a good quarterback. No disrespect to him, but it's just what it is. Cam Coleman's an elite receiver. He's going to make this room better. And having the trio of him, Wingo, and Mosley, and then you can look more at the depth with McCutcheon, Lockett. You feel really good about the receiver room. You feel really good about the weapons that Arch Manning has to work with. And you have the feeling that this offense is going to be much, much more explosive than it was this year or possibly even in 2024.
Yeah, I think all that's really true. I think we can, on the topic of explosiveness, we can talk about the two running backs that Texas got, and that's Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers. They first got Raleek Brown, I think, might have been last Thursday. It was sometime last week, and he's a former All Big 12 running back. He played for Arizona State. I think, in a lot of ways, Texas, the biggest area that, or the biggest improvement from last year to next year might be in the running back room to go from Trey Wisner and C.J. Baxter and Christian Clark to Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers. That's a pretty big step up, and I'll get your thoughts first before I go into what I like and what I maybe would like to see furthermore from those two.
Yeah. So with the duo, are we just touching Malik Brown right now, or you
You
touching
can do
both?
either,
Okay.
both.
So I think you bring in an amazing running back duo with bringing these two in. You saw this year with now, granted, the O line was not the best. It was not the best run block O line that we could have, especially for the first half of the season. But you did see a huge drop off in the running back production than you saw in 2024. Our leading running back, I think, didn't even eclipse 500 rushing yards on the year. There were some injuries involved with that, but you really failed to see any lethal run game at all. Wisner, like I just said, hit under 500. I'm pretty sure. Baxter, you could clearly see that after his ACL injury and after his recovery, he did not have the same explosiveness nor um, contact balance that he had before. And then when you get guys like Clark, who first college football action, Jared Gibson, who had a problem with holding onto the ball and fumbling, and then Simons, who there's no problem with them. It's just that they have no experience and that there was not much that they were able to bring to the table this year. Um, you have to look for different solutions. And letting Wisner go, yes, he was amazing in rivalry games. He against A&M, he almost totaled 400 yards in his two games. But when you bring in guys like Raleek Brown, who rushed for over 1,000 yards and averaged around 6 yards a carry, that's some amazing production. You look at his tape; he is very fast. He's a very speedy guy. He can navigate holes really well. And he has that breakaway speed that we haven't seen from a Texas running back probably since Bijan Robinson. You saw it with Blue, actually. I'll take that back. But I think you'll see a much faster running back room this year. And then when you go to Hollywood Smothers from North Carolina State, who he rushed for just under 1,000 yards this year at 939 yards, but in total, he totaled over 1,000 yards. It's another great running back that you bring in who was committed to Alabama. And right after we got Cam Coleman, you saw an hour or two later that we were able to flip him from Alabama. So this guy was a very very coveted running back in the portal. He's not as fast as Raleek Brown, but he has much better contact balance. He has the ability to get a lot more yards after contact. Whereas Raleek Brown, you'll see a lot more explosiveness. You see his ability to hurdle people. You see just you'll see a lot of diversity in this running back room between these two. Uh, it's going to be one of the best running back duos in the SEC, if not the country, in my opinion. Having two guys who, like I've kind of touched on this a little bit too much, but two near 1,000-yard backs, they are able to produce a lot. They're able to do really good, and I think I would expect Hollywood Smothers to probably get the start, but Raleek Brown is going to play a huge role, especially in the backfield too. I think he could make a really big contribution in terms of the passing game, catching balls out of the backfield and creating a lot of creating explosives out of that because I touched on his speed, but he's really fast if you watch his tape.
Yeah, I was going to add the part about the what Brown can do in the pass game, which you mentioned at the very end. I think it's probably one of the areas that he's going to be the most effective and one of the areas that'll be a big strength for Texas next year and what they really missed last year and even the year before. They're going to have a back that they can use in pass concepts where you feel comfortable with him running rail routes. You feel comfortable with him running angle routes, Texas routes. You can put him on a two-way go against a linebacker and give him a choice route where he can run either an angle or he can run an arrow route into the flat. He's got the ability to not only be a weapon in the pass game, but he can be someone who, like you said, because of his speed and because of his ability to wiggle, because of his lateral quickness, because of his ability to cut, he can make one guy miss. And if you make one guy miss, you can turn a 5 yarder into a 15 yarder and give Manning really easy completions and really easy yardage in a way that he just didn't have last year, right? I think we can all say that now is every time Texas played and every time they had a completion or everything that wasn't a 40-yard go or a scramble into a really big chunk play, it wasn't a whole lot of easy stuff for Arch. It was a lot of having to struggle through the offense. Like we said with Cam Coleman and like we're going to say with Malik Brown, you saw that. You're going to have a lot more easy solutions. You're going to have a lot more easy yards. And that's going to, one, in turn, allow Manning to play a little bit faster, a little bit slower, depending on what you need, where you can get him through his reads a little bit quicker because he knows the check down is actually going to be 5 yards. It may even be a first down. And it can cause him to slow down his reads because now he knows, hey, I can now go through my reads knowing that my check down is going to give me an option. So it allows him to play with different tempos in terms of not only from his drops, but from his eye progression, being able to stay on a route quit a little bit longer versus being able to send a route a little bit shorter and move on into the progression, which I think is going to be really, really important for him. And then with Hollywood Smothers, I do think he's going to be the lead back. He's got great contact balance. I think his vision is among the best in the entire portal. And that's something that Texas has kind of struggled with for the last 2 years. And this is no disrespect to Trey Wisner, but he's just not, that's not really his strength. He's not a guy who's great at being patient and feeling blocks and then finding the right hole, right? That's not Trey Wisner's strengths in the same way that it is Hollywood Smothers. So to me, that's a really big deal for Texas. His ability to, one, understand an inside zone where the ball is going to go based off of where the three technique is set. Where, okay, if the three technique is away from me, the cutback is probably going to be what ends up happening. Whereas if the three technique is to my side, I'm probably going to follow the blocks and work downhill and work away from the three technique. And so just simple things like that of understanding blocking leverages and those things, I think he does a really good job of, especially when you watch him on tape. So that's obviously a really big thing for Texas is having someone who's patient and who has great contact balance that can turn 2 yards into 4 yards or 3 yards into 5 yards, and that gets you from a 3rd and 5 where teams can be a little bit more aggressive in terms of their pressures into a 3rd and 3 or a 3rd and 2 where now the entire offense is at your playbook, but the defense has to play something that's a little bit more base, or they're not able to run all the different stuff to mess with your protections or to attack you in protection, which again is something that Texas had a lot of problems with last year, especially in the Florida game and especially in the Georgia game where they got hunted in protection, and a lot of that was because they could not run the ball. I don't foresee that being an issue with Texas so long as they make the right moves in terms of the offensive line and in the portal, which Clint and I will get into in just a little bit after we talk about the other side of the ball and some of the portal additions there.
Yeah. The first guy we're going to talk about is a linebacker transfer from Pitt, Rasheem Biles. He's a junior, and this year he totaled 39 total tackles. He had 4.5 sacks with 2 forced fumbles and 2 interceptions. Pack defense is your bread and butter. What do you see from this tape? From what type of player he is, and what do you think he'll contribute to this Texas defense?
Yeah, so Pitt runs what's known as press quarters, which is going to be pretty similar to what Texas runs on base downs. So they're going to ask their linebackers to play basically a stack track fallback, which means they're going to stack the nearest head up or inside shade guard or tackle, and then they're going to read the flow of the back, and based off the flow, they're going to fit the play side A gap or the play side C gap, depending on what side they're on, or the backside A gap or the backside C gap. So they're basically just flowing with the back. It's what's known as a ball fit. That's going to immediately translate to what Texas does. So it's a good system fit. So that's number one. Is it's going to be someone that you can plug and play. He's got a lot of snaps, which is super valuable. That might be someone that you can actually play as your Mac or your Mike, which is your green dot, which is something that Texas desperately needed. Right? They didn't have someone that you necessarily thought on the roster was going to be the signal caller because Ty Anthony Smith just hadn't played a ton in terms of he hadn't played starter snaps all year pretty much. He split snaps with Leona Lafau, but it wasn't like he was getting. It's not like he's had 1,000 snaps to his career, right? So you needed someone that had a lot of snaps and who's seen a lot of football and who understands how to communicate a defense, especially when there is so many moving parts like there is in a Saban style defense because of all the different coverage multiples you'll have, because of the different fronts that you'll use, because of how you might respond to the Y or what you want to set your front based on, what your different adjustments are going to be in game. So you've got to have a green dot who's seen a lot of football and knows a lot of football, and so Texas has that with Rasheem Biles most likely. We'll see if they decide to use a different Mac or a different Mike, but that would be my initial assumption. One of the things that to me is somewhat noteworthy is in terms of body type, Rasheem Biles is not the biggest guy. I think he's about 6'3", 6'2", and he's about 220 pounds. That's pretty similar to what Ty Anthony Smith is. And if you look at what Georgia is in terms of what they have at the linebacker position, it's a lot more 6'2", 6'3", and it's a lot more 230, 235. So is Texas going to be a little bit more downhill? Are they going to try to do some different things with their linebackers because they are smaller? That'll be something that'll be really interesting to kind of keep an eye on because the body types aren't the same. And so that may change up what Muschamp has to do in terms of the front. That's why, to me, losing Bo Barnes was a really big deal because Bo Barnes is the exact profile of what a Georgia linebacker looks like. And in terms of his speed, his lateral ability, his footwork, all that stuff, it's what you look at. It's what you see when you watch someone at Georgia, when you watch a CJ Allen, when you watch a N'Kobe Dean, when you watch a Raylan Wilson, when you watch a Chris Cole, a Justin Williams, all the different linebackers that they have. So that'll be something that'll be really interesting to watch for Texas is how does the body type dictate the defense that Muschamp wants to run next year? But outside of that, I think it's a good ad. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a huge fan of the Justin Cryer ad. In a vacuum, I would comfortably say Bo Barnes would have been the guy I would have taken. Now, maybe there's some budgeting in there, right, where you may save money and you can use that money now in a different guy, like one that just entered the portal at a position of need. So we'll see what Texas does in terms of maybe that Bo Barnes money that they saved will be used towards a offensive tackle that they need or whatever else may pop up. But Rasheem Biles is a good ad. I'm not a huge fan of the Cryer ad. The Bo Mascow ad, I'm kind of in wait and see mode. I don't imagine he'll start, which to me kind of makes it a. I'm not so sure I like the ad if you lose Warren Roberson, who I liked especially at cornerback, unless they plan on playing Mascow at corner and then letting Kobe Black and Grayson Littleton play at nickel, which we can talk about in a couple weeks when we start to break down some of the defensive concepts. But for now, I'll just say I don't love the idea of Grayson Littleton playing nickel next year for Texas. So to me, I'm not a big fan of some of the defensive ads. But like I said, we don't know exactly what Muschamp's going to run, so that'll dictate a lot of what you have to see and a lot of what you get.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of that pretty well. One other guy I guess you didn't touch on the defensive side would have been Ian Gifford, who was the nose tackle transfer from Arkansas. I believe he's
Yeah.
a nose tackle. Um, it's just with him, I don't really have too much to say. Just another big body. You need one. You need those guys for to be able to get those goal line stands, which is something that Texas has been big on the past couple of years. We did it against A&M to win a game. And you saw a lot of crucial fourth down stops with against Kentucky earlier in the season, a couple times to win that game. And you're just seeing it a lot of times for this defense to be able to get them. You need a guy like that. He's not going to be a guy who's just going to really fill the stat sheet. But he's going to be a guy that helps everyone around him be better and creates lanes for other players to make plays. So um, I don't know if I necessarily have too much to say regarding many of the defensive players because I just haven't watched the film for a lot of them. I do think Biles, I think he's pretty athletic from what I've seen. I think he has good downhill speed. Masco, he's a decent corner. I don't, like you said, I don't know if he'll start. With how it looks right now, I think it would be Kobe Black and Cade Phillips starting, maybe. Um, I'm not too sure, but yeah, I'll have to watch the defensive films more, but that's just kind of what I have to say in regards to that. And then just I can just name some of the other guys that we got in the portal. We don't have to really dive into them. Yeah, Gianni Spedic, who's going to be the kicker for next year. He was a Luke Rosa semifinalist, so we got a replacement for Mason Shipley right there. Um, you have the punter from Florida State, Mac. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that last name, but he was a pretty good punter last year. You have Michael Masunis, who is in blocking tight end. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to see a lot go on routes and make a lot of plays in the receiving game, but he's going to be a good piece for us to be able to run pony package and 12 personnel to where you're able to really use Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown on the field at the same time, which is something that we really lacked this year because neither Andrews nor really Washington or any of the other tight ends, I would say, really brought in a good blocking game like Juan Davis used to do back in 2024. So having a good inline blocking tight end like that was a big get. He was one of the top in the Big Ten in that regard. So I think that's a underrated get that we've gotten. And then I know you wanted to touch on Jordan Seaton and the Wisconsin offensive lineman Bruner. So Seaton yesterday, he entered the portal from Colorado. Right now, as it looks, Oregon and Texas are in the mix too, or I would say the mix, but they're the two leaders right now. And this guy he's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft whenever he goes. If Texas is able to get him, especially with the loss of Nick Brooks today, it feels like a necessity to get him almost. You will have at both of your tackle spots likely a top 10 pick in the draft for both of them. That doesn't even include what you'd have at guard with Brandon Baker. If you get Bruner and then you have Connor Robertson coming back, you have one of the best offensive lines in the nation. And that's an offensive line to where you should be scoring 30 plus a game, really no excuses. You would have possibly going to the preseason, probably on paper, the best offense in the nation. That would just be my personal opinion. You could argue it with other teams, but with all of that there, you have Cam Coleman, Seaton, Gooseby, and Arch. Just those four guys alone could be top 10 picks. And that's even taking into account what you have on defense with Colin Simmons, for example. This team next year, if we end up getting these two, or even just for now, it is a very and very draft rich team. It is an all in year. It is a year to where you are expecting to win a national championship and you need to. We're going to have a very talented team next year. What other points do you really have to add to this?
Yeah, so I think Jordan Seaton, one, he's expected to visit Oregon when the dead period ends on Thursday. I would imagine if Texas is able to stretch it out and is able to convince Seaton not to commit on the Oregon visit and take the Texas visit, I imagine Texas will wrap it up that weekend. They'll try to get him to commit by Sunday or Monday, whenever he visits. But you mentioned it, Jordan Seaton at this point now, when you lose Nick Brooks, is basically a must get. You need to get Nick. You need to get Jordan Seaton because at that point you go from needing a left guard and a right guard to having an entire side of your offensive line set, right? And one of the things that Texas fans should understand is Jordan Seaton will not come to Texas as a right tackle. Jordan Seaton is 100% tackle one in next year's draft. If you look up any 2027 big board, Trevor Gooseby is not tackle one. It's Jordan Seaton. The only reason that Trevor Gooseby wasn't even tackle one in this year's draft, and this year's draft is not that good at tackle. It's the best tackle in the class is Francis Magua, and a lot of scouts think he's going to end up being a guard at the NFL. So it's really important to understand that Jordan Seaton will be the left tackle if he comes. Anyone who thinks that he's going to be the right tackle, he will not come to Texas to be the right tackle when Oregon will let him be the left tackle. And the other thing to understand is this will be really, really expensive. Hal Lewis, a Florida booster, said that bidding started at 2.5. It might have started at that 2 months ago when teams started tampering for him. I have on good authority Oregon has offered more than $4 million. So this will cost Texas a lot of money. It's absolutely worth it because if you do get Jordan Seaton, what it allows you to do is it allows you to move Brandon Baker inside to right guard, where I think that's going to be a really big strength for Texas. If you can have Connor Robertson, Trevor or Brandon Baker and Trevor Gooseby as the three guys next to each other, your entire right side of the offensive line feels really, really clean. And then all you need is a left guard. And you can get that through the graduate transfer portal, which will happen sometime in May, or you can figure that out on the roster, or you can try to get someone out of the portal, or you hope to develop someone. But if you lose Seaton, not only do you lower the ceiling of what next year's offensive line is going to be, but you really, really are in a tough spot because now you're going to have to hope that two really good guards enter from the graduate transfer portal, and that you actually land them. And so that's a really big thing for Texas. They're going to have to. I think Jordan Seaton is now a must get. We'll see if they do get him. Oregon's felt confident, so we'll see where that goes. And then I still think Texas probably needs another safety just for the fact that you really have three guys that you have in the rotation that you can probably trust to get snaps early, and that's Xavier Filsaime, Derek Williams, and Jelani McDonald. Jonah Williams isn't going to be there at spring camp. He's not going to be there during winter camp. He probably won't be there for a lot of summer camp too because of baseball. So that's a lot of time that you're missing for a guy to come in and play what is really the most complex position in the defense. Safety's got a lot of moving parts in the Saban stuff. So um, if you're Texas, I think you have to act under the impression that Jonah Williams won't be a meaningful contributor next year, which means you probably should get another safety. So there's a couple of things that Texas has to do in the portal, but number one, you got to land Jordan Seaton. Now, if they do, to add on to Clint's point, Texas will have at minimum five top 15 picks, and that'll be Arch Manning, who's probably going to be the first overall pick. Colin Simmons will be a top five pick. Jordan Seaton, probably a top five pick. Trevor Goose will be a top 10 pick, and then Cam Coleman will be a top 10 pick or a top 15 pick. So you do end up having what is probably going to be the most talented roster in the entire country, and it will really be a national title or bust year. And you especially have to do that now, looking at the lack of depth. It's one thing to say, we're not going to go all in because we have incredible depth and we can build towards another year, or we have 15 5-star freshmen that are on the bench that we want to let develop. It's another thing to not have a lot of depth at all, right? Texas does not have a lot of depth at a lot of positions. And now, because of that, you do, and this is the last year of Arch Manning, you do need to build. You do need a certain level of roster here. You need to build a really talented roster to maximize Arch Manning. And if you don't, that's a colossal failure. So that starts with Jordan Seaton. I know that there's some people around Texas that have some quiet confidence, so we'll see what ends up turning out with that. By the time that Clint and I are talking next week, I imagine a decision will be made. The speculative date that I've heard in terms of when you'll hear a commitment is by the 17th. So we'll watch out for that, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. Earlier in the stream, I know you said talk about like a quick outlook of the schedule next year. Do you want to do that this show or the next show?
Yeah, we'll do that next show because we'll be able to
Okay.
see what Jordan Seaton does, and we'll see if Texas made any moves on the offensive line, and we'll have a little bit better of an inkling of what the roster will look like. But a pretty short show today, kind of is given that there's not a whole lot of football, and the portal, especially this week, slowed down a considerable bit because of the dead period. I would say watch out for tomorrow and Thursday. I do think there's going to be some bigger names entering the portal. There might be a linebacker or two that Texas has to get that'll enter the portal. So watch out for that. There might be a couple of really big secondary players that enter in the portal. So the portal's not done yet. Keep that in mind for Texas and for everyone else. I do think that there's one guy that Texas has to get right now. It's Jordan Seaton, and we'll see if they do. But Clint, if you don't have anything else, I think I'm going to call it here. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet. Follow Clint at NBA Hornboy, me at Pack Talks XO. Follow Total Coverage Sports on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow Ghost on Twitter. And then we really appreciate you guys